Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about reality and what's unreal, and how do we determine reality in as far as something that's a perversion or something that is real and consistent with, say, human organic development and so on. So whenever ideology is imposed upon humans, it starts to move away from the reality or the natural development and inclination and behavior of humans. Let's just have a little look at that. For example, let's say the crazy, murderous, barbaric Soviet communist regime in Russia, following the 1917 revolution. Now, you can say this was madness, and madness that was imposed ideologically and very brutally and murderously on the people, who never would have voted for it or agreed to it or gone along with it, which is why it had to be so murderous and brutal, because the people didn't really want it. Was that the reality? Because it's happening. It's a perversion of reality, but it's another form of reality superimposed upon natural reality. So, when today, say in a business meeting, I'm sitting in front of the affirmative action, or across the table from the affirmative action black lesbian who's been appointed as the CEO or as the C-level executive, who is in any real world, there is no way she would get this role. This would be impossible. But in the perversion of reality that we see around us, then it is possible. And not only is it possible, but it's widespread. Yet I can say, well, this is unreal. There's no reality to this. It's a clown world. We've left reality behind. Sure, we can say that, but it's real. She is sitting right in front of me, right across the, she's right there, and she does have the role of CEO, and it is supported by that organisation and by the globalist controlled media and so on. So I can say, well, this ideology is crazy, it's unreal, but it is real also at the same time. So we're looking at, when we look at unreality or or a lack of reality, what are we really talking about? Are we talking about something that's temporary? For example, the madness of the Soviet Union lasted for like 70 odd years, and then just suddenly collapsed and disappeared as an organised state way of government, at least. Now, for 70 years it was real, and then suddenly it was unreal. Suddenly it ceased to exist. So that reality that it relied upon and based itself upon, the invented ideological reality that had no basis, it was always had a feet of clay and was always going to crumble and fall over. So it was just a case of how long it would take. So the further anything goes from reality, as in natural organic reality, the further it travels away from that. You're just counting off the days before it all comes, falls down in a screaming heap. But how long will that be? It could be a year, it could be 5 minutes, it could be 50 years, or 100 years, or whatever. So, but the difference is when ideology is inserted in between reality and what's happening on the ground. That ideological insertion is where the perversion from reality. Now it can be, this ideology can take temporary forms, like a temporary form of paranoia or fear or something that grips the ruling elite, or whatever the case may be. But still, when we look at reality, that no matter how far from reality something gets, as long as it's being enforced and enacted, even temporarily, that is thus the reality in front of you. That's the reality from day to day. So how do we behave and survive, or indeed prosper, when reality is being perverted? Because whatever is happening at the time in front of you is the new reality. Now, that new reality may be temporary, but it nonetheless is the new reality. The new reality, for example, affirmative action, race and gender quotas, things of that nature. they're the new reality. They're the current reality. Now, inevitably, it's all going to fall to pieces, but it could be a long time before it is. And the damage, the collateral damage it leaves in its wake could take decades longer to repair and make good upon. But nonetheless, it is the current reality. So when we try and say, well, we have to be realistic about this, then the reality is the madness. The madness has now become the reality. And that's something that how do we work with it? I'll be interested in looking at your comments below, but how do we again work with that reality? Do we disengage totally from what's going on and say, well, that's crazy, I don't want anything to do with that crazy bullshit, or do we say, well, let's go along with it, let's pretend we go along with it, because if I pretend I go along with it, I'm more likely to have an easier time, to not be given a hard time, to get a better job, or not be arrested, or whatever. So do you just go along with it, or do you sort of this quiet quitting type thing? Do you appear to be passively going along, but in reality you're not really supporting it or going along with it at all? You're not necessarily undermining it, but you're just sort of doing a partial or limited engagement, minimal engagement, to just try and get by without getting a hard time. So this reality of dealing with reality, because the reality is the madness. The madness is now the reality, and again, it may not last long. And whether this is affirmative action or whether it's the outrageous and incessant lies that the mass media tells us, there are Nazis and misogynists everywhere, these sorts of things. These are all perversions of reality. We're in the middle of a rape epidemic. We're in the middle of a misogyny epidemic. We're in the middle of Nazi epidemics. We're in the middle of health epidemics, climate change epidemic. Everything's a fucking epidemic. And none of these things are real, though. They're all invented realities. Yet, as the Canadian truckers are finding, if you oppose that, they'll throw you in prison. So the perversion has again become the reality. So how do we navigate through that? How can sensible people navigate through it? You look at, say, in the case of the Soviet Union, there were people that Alexander Solzhenitsyn, for example, who were prepared to demonstrate the madness and the craziness of the ideology of the Soviet system. Same Mao's Cultural Revolution in the late 1950s in China, the madness of that. But and it was an insane perversion of actual reality. But actual reality and ideological imposed reality, can they actually coexist? Does the imposed ideological reality temporarily replace organic reality? These are I think, amongst the bigger questions of our time, and I don't know if anyone has the answer. You've been with Tassos today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.